You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So the Big 12, a very interesting conference now. We're not going to sit here and say it's the SEC or the Big 10, but it's very intriguing. And as somebody who has grown up in the Big 12 footprint over the last 20 years, basically, I'm still going to be very intrigued by what happens in Big 12 football this year because it's just right in my backyard. But Jay asked a really interesting hypothetical through our text messages. Where would we rank Oklahoma? And we can include Texas in this, in the new look Big 12. And where might the media even rank Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma in particular, in the new look Big 12? Jay, what do you think?
So in that hypothetical, I saw it come across the desk. I think it was on 3, George Stoya at Sooner Scoop. It was one of his mailbag questions that came up, and I was like, what? So when I looked at it, I'm like, interesting. And so we'll do it two ways. We'll do it with Oklahoma and Texas there. Also, if Oklahoma was the only one that stayed and Texas left. I'm curious to what you think about that. But for me, if it was both of them, because Oklahoma beat Texas last year, I think they'd probably make Oklahoma number one, right? That's the team that probably should get the most. But if it was my vote, I'm throwing Oklahoma number one just because they beat Texas last year. And I think they can continuously do that. Now, the question is where things get muddy is when you start adding in like Utah, right? You throw in Utah in there. And just about how people feel about them and Kyle Whittingham coming over, they're probably the one wild card team that's probably going to cause the most problems in the Big 12. Well, at least they're the one that was voted as the best one there, right? Of course, Arizona is going to be terrifying, but I don't think teams believe they're going to actually win the Big 12. But Kansas State as well, right? With Avery Johnson and then getting Dylan Edwards. Kind of makes them scary. So if it was both of them, I think Oklahoma would be number one. If it was Oklahoma by himself, I think Oklahoma would still be number one because it's the Big 12. Oklahoma's owned it for, since its inception.
I mean, I can see a scenario. Yeah, I can see a scenario where it's like Texas number one because everybody loves Texas this year for some odd reason. I'm being painted as a hater right now, and that's fair. I'll own it. I'm gonna get a jersey that says Texas Hater on the back, so everybody can be pacified by that. But I think Texas would probably be number one. I could see Oklahoma State or Utah at 2 or 3, and I could see Oklahoma being 4. Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma last year. I know Oklahoma beat Texas, but apparently that doesn't matter to anybody in the media, anybody that has a vote. Oklahoma's beating Texas apparently didn't happen. It doesn't exist. It's fake news. It's not a real thing. So I could totally see Oklahoma kind of dropping back a little bit. I don't think they'd fall below Kansas State because, again, you're talking about a first-year starting quarterback in Avery Johnson, and it's just a lot of turnover. I don't see them falling behind Iowa State, which for some reason is getting a lot of love. As much as I love Rocco Becht, I haven't seen Iowa State do anything significant except for back in that 2020 season. I don't see them falling behind Arizona, even though, maybe Arizona could be ahead of them, but the fact that they lost Jed Fish and their coaching staff, maybe they don't get ranked ahead of Oklahoma in the new look or the what if look Big 12. So yeah, it's interesting because the opinion on Oklahoma just seems to be so varied. There's a lot of places that have Oklahoma as, man, they're going to be great. They're going to do just fine. A guy like Josh Pate from 247 Sports and the Late Kick Show. He likes where Oklahoma's headed. Paul Feinbaum obviously likes the direction, even if he doesn't think there will be a contender in 2024. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are really down on Oklahoma going into this year.
Which is wild to me, as we've talked about, like a lot of your national talking heads really have been talking about that, hey, y'all are overlooking Oklahoma a little too much, right? I understand being cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, don't be too pessimistic on what they're capable of. But it's really like a lot of your beat writers, your local media folks that really are pushing the Oklahoma ain't what they think they are. Oklahoma's going to come into a conference and really learn what it's supposed to be. And it's like, I still love what Andy Staples said. Every conference that Oklahoma's gone to, they found a way to get to the top. They've got 50 conference championships for a reason, the most in college football history. They find a way to get to the top of every conference they've ever been. They're not going to win it every time. Now we're not going to have an Alabama Estique type run where like the 2 runs that they've had of 6 and 7 championships over like a 13-year period. We're not going to do that, but we're consistent on being at the top every single time. We find a way to get there. And the school has always shown they cared enough to be great at it. And I think that's the difference maker to me in the conversation, is that Oklahoma would have found a way in this one, in the new Big 12. All these new teams, awesome. It's great to see more competition in there. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Oklahoma, especially because Oklahoma still maintains the same thing they do every year. Very high blue chip ratio. And they keep getting some of the best players. And by having so many great players, the question is always what does development look like? And the guys we have been proven developers. All they got to do now is continue to execute. But I guess the question for that is, with Texas out, if it's just Oklahoma, what teams will probably be around them, right? Like, is it just, Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas, and Arizona? Are those really the only ones that you would consider the ones to keep an eye out? With Kansas, also jump in that conversation.
Yeah. I think you include both Kansas schools, Arizona, Utah. That's about it. I'm not ready to put Colorado up there. I'm not ready to put Iowa State up there, even though, again, I like Shadur. He's a great player. I like Rocco Beck, a good player that's ascending. Just not ready to put them in that upper tier of football teams in the Big 12. I think Texas Tech is one that's growing and it's improving. But again, I think that's going to be one of those overhyped teams this season. Now, you take the new look Big 12, the 16 teams they've got in the conference. Who would be your early pick right now to win the conference? For me, it's Oklahoma State.
I'm still on the Utah train just because Kyle Whittingham has been he's always fielded teams that are just tough. So Utah is still my number one. Oklahoma State should run the Big 12. But that's never been their MO of actually doing what they're supposed to do, right? When they're supposed to have 10 or 11 wins, they end up with 6 or 7. When they're supposed to have 6 or 7 wins, they end up with 11. So they're not a team that I trust on consistency or expectations. They're forever a wild card in my eyes, even though shout out to, Gundy. Of all things, the dude's only had 1 losing season his entire tenure there, and that's been 20 years. It's absurd to think that a coach has been able to walk in and pull a Bob Stoops, right? Like, the rival has pulled a Bob Stoops, but they just always lose right before they get a chance to play for the title. It's just hilarious. It's the game of inches. They can never get over that 1 inch.
They come up just short. They come up just short.
By that much,
whether it's the BCS championship series rankings or the Big 12 title game against Baylor, where they just go, it's short. They're just now they blew it against UCF last year, where they got absolutely curb stomped in the space game. But I think Oklahoma State has a chance to do some pretty special things if Gundy can keep their head locked in every single week, because you got Ollie Gordon and the dude is a terror. Rashad Owens, also a terror out there. And again, you've got a really, really experienced quarterback in Alan Bowman. So the Big 12 is going to be a lot of fun. Again, this isn't Locked On Big 12, but for your second listen, if you like Big 12 football, go check out Locked On Big 12, or you can go check out our man Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or Spencer McLaughlin and Locked On College Football. Those guys are doing great work covering all the angles at the conference level, at the national level. So go check it out. Subscribe to Locked On Sooners wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit the notification button over there to let you know when new episodes drop. And now you can also join the Locked On Sooners Insider Program by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. You'll get 25% off your first month, and you can have direct one-on-one conversations with Jay and myself. You can ask us questions that we will do in a special Q&A for you, the members of the Locked On Sooners Insider Program, but we'll also use your thoughts, your comments to create content here on the show as well. So go check it out by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams, the show again at Locked On Sooners on all the socials. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer.
Sooner.